Welcome back to Energetically You. I'm your host, Megan Swan, the creator of the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. I love all things healthy habits, abundant mindset, and optimal wellness. This podcast is for powerful women who are looking to maintain their energy and or level up naturally to have sustainable, integrated energy throughout their day so that they can show up for themselves, their families, and do their soul work, impacting the world on a greater scale. Today, I have the honor of interviewing a gentleman whose name is Christian de la Huerta. He has 30 years of experience in He is a sought-after spiritual teacher, personal transformational coach, and a leading voice in the breathwork community. That is mostly what I'm so curious to talk to him about. He has traveled the world offering inspiring and transformational retreats, combining psychological and spiritual teachings with lasting and life-changing effects. An award-winning, critically acclaimed author, he has spoken at numerous universities and conferences and on the TEDx stage. His new book, Awakening the Soul of Power, was described by multiple Grammy Award-winning Gloria Estefan as a balm for the soul of anyone searching for truth and answers to life's difficult questions. A balm for the soul. I love that. You can check out all his information in the show notes, and we will dive right in. Welcome, Christian. Thank you so much for being here today. I am honored. You have such an extensive wealth of experience and knowledge. I'm curious. I've read a lot of in your bio and your website in terms of the pivot you recently made this year. But I know you have decades of experience doing retreats and sort of in-person coaching type workshops. You want to tell us your experience with COVID and your recent pivot?
Yes, hi. And first of all, thanks for having me on the show, Megan. I love what you're doing, and I'm committed to helping, supporting the empowerment of women. So I love the mission and happy to be here in support of that. So yeah, like you say, I've been doing retreats and workshops and using breathwork as a healing modality for the last 30 years. And as you can imagine, with COVID, it came to a screeching halt. I went from traveling 100,000 miles a year to zero, which, was actually a blessing for me. Without minimizing the tragic parts of it, in terms of all the death and all the suffering and all the economic impact and all of that, for me, it was a blessing. For me, there was the mandatory global timeout forced me to finish a book that I've been brewing for the last, probably 8-10 years. And I've also known for years that I needed to create some virtual programming in order to reach people who may never be able to come to one of my retreats. And COVID forced my hand, and, here I am.
Well, that's beautiful. I think many people have had a similar, maybe surprising experience that it gave them a lot of time to do things that they've been meaning to do for a long time, and maybe some different inner work that, we always have this excuse, if you will, that you don't have the time to go deeper. So can you tell us a little bit about the experience and maybe some of the challenges in doing these breathwork type retreats online? Is it is it live? What is the structure that you've been finding most helpful for people?
Yeah, I'll go back to doing the live retreats as soon as we can. And I'm already scheduling some for, later at the end of this year, the beginning of next. And here's what I'm really appreciating about the year-long virtual coaching program. What I've seen over the years that people come to one of my retreats and they'll have an amazing, life-changing, transformational experience. For some of them, if they don't have a support system, if they don't have a practice, some kind of structure when they go back into their lives, it's easy to get distracted, by all the stuff in our overly scheduled lives and all the demands of life and the day-to-day. To get sucked back into the day-to-day, and little by little, I see the old voices of fear and self-doubt creep up and start pulling them down, and old behavior patterns start popping up again, and then they have to come to another retreat. What I love about this concept is that I get to spread out the teachings over the course of a year, and so deliver just bite-sized pieces, a little bit each week, a little bit of content each week, and this is what's key, though. Interactivity. So what this concept allows me to do is give practices that are going to help apply and integrate the teachings into everybody's lives, so that it doesn't stay at the level of information and actually, we can, it goes into the level of transformation, which is what we want. And then the other aspect of it, which I get to do in a year long, is put in a system of accountability. So we have coaching calls with me every 2 years, and then every 2 weeks. And then in between weeks, the people are divided into groups of 2 or 3. And that could be just a short 5-minute, 10-minute check-in process. But it's again designed to both create a system of support and keep us doing what we said we would do, which is what the reason most people want to do something like this is they want to see results in their lives and the relationships and, different goals and dreams that they want to put into place.
Yes, definitely very similar to my work, in that we just don't appreciate how hard it is to change our habits, even if there is, beautiful new practice type habits that we feel amazing when we do them. But if it's just not on your list of things to do and hasn't been for years, it's really hard to get it to this habit forming point that it becomes a part of who you are and your lifestyle, which is when the transformation really happens.
Yeah, I was reading about in your website, the way that you write about that. I love how you're talking about how you just were exhausted all the times as a mom, and we all know the demands of parenting, even if we're not parents ourselves. And I love how you write about the rinse and repeat cycle that left you depressed and negative and harsh on yourself. And so, yeah, I know that you know what you're talking about when you help people get free from those cycles.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of breathwork practices you do? Are there multiple modalities that you use, or do you have your certain favorites?
Well, breathwork is more like an umbrella term. So there are a lot of different breathing techniques that we get to use for different purposes. Like there's some breathing practices for relaxation and stress management and to help us sleep better. Then there are other breathing practices that are great to have an energizing, focusing, centering effect. And then the type that I offer in retreats, it's a longer practice. You actually breathe in a circular, connected way for about an hour and a half, and amazing things happen. I come out of the psychotherapy tradition. My dad was a psychiatrist. My degree's in psychology. I was on a track to get a PhD, and when I discovered breathwork 30 years ago, I jumped tracks. I never went for the PhD because it works so fast and heals so profoundly at so many levels. And to the more scientific part of my mind, the more rational part of my skeptical mind, I know that sounds too good to be true, because on top of all the healing that it happens, it can provide some amazing experiences of connectedness and oneness and just feeling part of everything, of no mind, of profound states of bliss and just knowing. And the science isn't quite there yet in terms of explaining how it works, like what's happening in the body when we breathe in this way. like they haven't done the research that they've done for meditation yet. There's so much evidence on the physical and the emotional and even productivity benefits of meditation. Breathwork isn't quite there yet, but here's the way that I understand it is more from a psycho-spiritual perspective. And so when we think about the fact that in most spiritual traditions and in many secular languages or some secular languages, one word, the same word, can mean spirit or breath. And so the breath is, it's our most loyal, our most faithful companion on this journey of embodiment. And so many of the sacred texts talk about breath, the breath of life. And so it's from that perspective that I begin to understand how it works, because it's so powerful that it really hard for the mind to wrap itself around, but I can't argue with the result. It's like I've witnessed and experienced such profound healing and changes that sometimes the only word that I can think of to explain how it works is just a miracle. Or magic.
I love how you, I'm a yogi and I have that context of pranayama, right. and I do use to some extent breath work, but from what you're talking about, I think it's quite juvenile, my understanding of it. I've never done anything that's an hour plus, so I'd be so curious to try, because I am convinced that it must be powerful, because you can, in 2 minutes, you can change someone's state of being. So I can imagine after such extended periods. Can you tell us?
Seriously, it's like, with some of the pranayam practices are really powerful. You're right. After a couple of minutes, you can have an incredible different effect in your body. And so imagine doing it for like an hour and a half. And the results, I can tell you so many stories, but I've worked with people who, I don't know anything more effective in terms of healing past trauma. And I'm talking people who I've worked with who've experienced sexual abuse and rape and survived violent crimes, and it gets healed. And I don't know anything more effective in terms of clearing suppressed emotions, and that are in the way of our relationships, because we've been conditioned to think that emotions are weakness, right? Whereas emotions, especially men, little boys don't cry, which is a twisted, way of approaching this whole thing about the feminine being weakness. Because if you want to talk power and strength, let's talk about the power of creation that resides in a female body. That's power of life. What is more powerful than that? And yet, because somewhere along the way we got this twisted perception of what it means to be a man, and what it means to be strong, that the emotions are weakness. Well, the emotions are not strength, they're not weakness, they're not good, they're not bad, they're just energy. What used to be spiritual teaching that everything is energy, now we know from quantum physics that it's true. Everything is energy, including the body, including the emotions. We know from physics, energy cannot be destroyed. So just because we don't allow ourselves to feel something, for all the reasons that we run away from our emotions, and numb out to what we're feeling, that stuff doesn't go away. We suppress it, but it stays in there. And after a lifetime of suppressing our stuff, we walk around with layers and layers and layers of suppressed emotional crap, unhealed past trauma, and emotions that we didn't allow ourselves to feel and communicate. And so then here we are trying to have a relationship in the present moment. All of it is getting filtered through that lifetime of suppressed emotional crap. Like how any relationship works just boggles my mind. Because we haven't been taught how to approach them, how to hold them, and how to clear ourselves so that they can actually have a chance. And those energies are going to come out one way or another. So either we suppress and suppress and suppress, and then the next unfortunate one says something the wrong way, and boom, right, volcanic eruption, which then causes harm. Right? We cause harm to our relationships. Sometimes we can fix it, sometimes they're irreparable. And then we go into that cycle of react and regret. And so, or we suppress, and that energy is going to start coming out one way or another. So start seeping out in bodily symptoms, cancer, heart attacks, stomach ulcers. So we've got to learn how to heal our relationship to our emotions so that we learn how to feel them and communicate them in a way that's both courageous and compassionate. And I would even add graceful, meaning in a way that the other person can hear it and receive it, not so that we're taking ownership for our emotions and not just dumping them on somebody else like we tend to do.
Yeah, that's all. I love everything you said there. Can you share us a little bit about your journey coming to the US and what helped you kind of shift the tide when you were younger? And was it just finding breathwork at that stage?
That's a good question. Breathwork definitely played a role in my process of healing and stepping into my power and my purpose. I'm a kind of an unlikely person to be writing about personal power. I grew up in Cuba in a communist regime for the first 10 years of my life. And, I'm sure most of your listeners know that in a totalitarian dictatorial regime, the discussion of personal power is kind of ludicrous. The state pretty much owns you and tells you what to do. And there's very few personal freedoms and liberties like so many that we take for granted here. I was also raised in a very Catholic environment, and with all the respect, to all religious paths, that was very also power over structure, with certain intermediaries, and you were told what's right and what's wrong and what to believe and what's true and what's not. So when I came over to the States, didn't speak a word of English. And one thing for which I'm really grateful of having been raised in a communist country is that we had a TV, but there was nothing worth watching. There was programming was really bad. So we grew up playing outside and creating our own games and having adventures and reading. So I developed a lifelong love affair with books. And I think that's one of the reasons why I did well in school when we came over. I was naturally a good student. But here's, I was actually had a 4.0, had a 4.0 in high school, except for 1B. And I didn't do this intentionally then, but looking back on it, I know that I sabotaged my GPA because back then there is no way that I could have gotten in front of a room of an auditorium filled with hundreds and hundreds of people and delivered the valedictorian speech. There's no way that I could have done that. So I know that I sabotaged that. And the point of my telling this story is that these days, I'm a public speaker. I'm a professional speaker. I speak all over the world. I've spoken on countless universities and the TEDx stage, so that I know, and this is part of what I write about, is how we break free from all these fears and old behavior patterns and limitations, and why it's so important to be willing to dive into ourselves and understand why we do the things we do, so that we can break free and bring choice back into our life, rather than just reacting from, like I was talking about before, stuff that happened to us when we were 5 or 10 or 15, and we're still living out of those choices that we made at a point in our lives we didn't know any better. So it's also the reason why this book is, it's part of a series of 3, and what it means to live heroically. Because to coast through life, anybody can do that. To numb out on our emotions in all the ways that we do, whether it's drugs or alcohol or shopping or TV or gaming or sex, all the things that we do to run away from ourselves and not feel our feelings. It's like anybody can do that. To be willing to pause and to dive inside and to try to figure out our patterns of behavior and why we do the things we do, and why we attract and create certain type of people and create certain type of situations into our lives. It's nothing short of heroic. It takes work, and it's so worthwhile, because as we do that, we have freedom. We discover freedom.
Yeah. I love that quote you have on your website. And the day that came when the risk it took to remain tight inside the bud was more painful than the risk to bloom or to blossom. I think that's but at the same time, like, most people are just afraid of doing the work, I think.
I think you're right. And I do love that quote from Anais Nin, who was part Cuban, by the way. She was part Cuban, part French, part American. And that's what it takes for so many of us, that we sometimes the comfort of life keeps us stuck in relationships or situations or jobs that aren't really fulfilling. And maybe they're comfortable, but maybe at some point, maybe at some level, that comfort turns into like soul devouring mediocrity, because at some level we're selling out on ourselves and we're not doing what we came here to do. So we sell out for an illusion of security. That's what we give our power away. And that's why I write about in this book, about all the ways in which we give our power away, power that is inherent to us. It's inside each one of us. Nobody can give that to us, and nobody can take it away. We are the only ones who can give it away. And the sad part is that we sell out on that power. We play small on our potential for an illusion of security, for a false sense of acceptance, and for morsels, crumbs of pseudo love.
Yeah, I think like I've read, I can't remember where now, but I think it's true that one of the most difficult things for humans, or one of the greatest fears that we share, is of the unknown. Hence why COVID was so stressful for most people, because it was this like no clear light at the end of the tunnel scenario for an extended period of time. Can you speak to that? I often talk about it as not power, but energy. Like, you're leaking energy doing certain things that you feel like are keeping you in this comfortable place. But like, how do you help people transition from that, from understanding that they're sort of sitting in their own discomfort, which is, they know that, so it's familiar, so it's not as scary as seeking out a fresh alternative, as children say.
Yeah, that's a great and very powerful and profound question. And it's scary. Change is scary, not to the bigness of who we are, but to the little ego mind, which is really important to understand how the ego mind works, because that is the source of all our fear. And we don't have time to dive into it in this setting, but a beautiful, quick metaphor that helps people get what the ego is. It's, if you put a baseball in the center of a stadium, that's what the ego is. Who we are, we're actually the stadium. And we've allowed this tiny, 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 tiny part of who we are to think that it is all of who we are, and to make critical, important, consequential choices about our lives, about our relationships from its very small and always fear-based perspective. So that's primary. That's to understand how the prison of the mind works, so that we can let ourselves free from it. But to say a little bit more about the fear of change, to the ego's job is to maintain the status quo. Even if the status quo is miserable, it doesn't care. Anything that signifies change, it's going to be threatened by. So that's the part of us that fears change. And to that part of us, fear is scary, right? It is stepping into the unknown. But to me, what is infinitely scarier is that another year, 5 years, 30 years will go by, and we're still stuck playing small in relationships or situations or jobs that are not a match for who we are, and that are sucking the life force out of us. And to me, that's infinitely scarier.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to how breathwork specifically helps you feel empowered, or helps you find clarity in these types of things?
Yeah. Well, I think one way that the breathwork, the longer sessions that I'm talking about, one of the benefits of it is that it pops us out of that baseball consciousness. And the ego, another quick way to think about it, it's a sense of who we are. It's our individual sense of identity. Like, I'm Christian, that's Megan. It's ultimately an illusion, and it's both a helpful illusion and a leap in consciousness. As far as we know, we're the only species that has a sense of self. And it's also the source of all our suffering. And again, it's such a huge conversation to get into it, but a really important one. So I really recommend to your audience that they spend some time trying to understand the ego, because there's the key to all our problems. All the answers to all our questions are derived from understanding how that works. So the breath work gives us the opportunity to pop out of the baseball and have a moment, an experience of ourselves as the stadium, as connected to something greater than we are. Often I'll hear from people, who'll tell me, I've been sitting on a meditation cushion for 20 years, 30 years even, to have that moment of no mind that I experience in breathwork. So it gives us a taste of it. It doesn't replace the benefits of a regular meditation practice. There's a lot to be said for that. But it kind of gives us a taste of it, gives us an experience of these moments that, of sense of freedom, of expansion, of connection, of realizing like the majesty and the hugeness of who we are. And such a simple, there are other ways to do that. I also hear from a lot of people who tell me, oh yeah, I got to the same place that I did on a sacred medicine journey. So there are definitely other ways to experience, to experience that. This is just real simple, and it's just you and your breath.
And so when someone's gone through a training with you or a retreat, the idea is that they take away the technique and then they continue practicing on their own? Or is there some need for it to be the presence of a coach?
It's recommended that, because it's so powerful and very cathartic, and people will sometimes, have really profound experiences. And in healing our past traumas, sometimes we remember them, and it can be very vivid. It's very worth it, right? It's not just thinking about it one more time, or just rehashing the past one more time. It's actually clearing that trauma at a body level, at a cellular level. And for most of us, it's safer, right? It feels safer psychologically and emotionally to do that in the presence of somebody else, somebody who's trained. So I would say probably ideal to do the first 5, the first 10 sessions with somebody who's trained, who can facilitate the experience, who can hold space, who can, take care of us, so that ego mind, that's also the one that's been suppressing all this stuff, can feel safe enough to release the stuff that needs to come up for remembering or for clearing.
Yeah.
People who train with me to do breath work, they have a lot of different requisites to complete their training. 9 out of 10, what they resist is the self-guided sessions, which, I definitely, after a certain after a certain point, you can be taught how to do it yourself. It's your breath. So definitely, but there's some important things to know about how to hold the space, when to do it, how often. So many questions, so many aspects of it that are important to know. And I think the reason that people resist doing it one-on-one, to do it on their own, my people who train with me, is because it's just you and your breath, right? And for many of us, that's scary because we don't know what's going to come up, what's going to be triggered.
Right. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So tell me about, you mentioned that this is a trilogy. So you already have the visualization of 2 other books that just haven't been written yet. And
yes.
So tell us about your process and the fact that you've been thinking about it for a decade.
Well, it started out as a book, as one book, but I started getting too long. And then I realized, I think it's better to divide it into smaller books. And then I just naturally realized that I could divide it thematically according to the themes of my retreat. So it's a perfect representation of those. It also reflected on this year-long program. So the themes that I cover in the year-long coaching program are also reflected in the themes of the book. So I started thinking about it probably 10 years ago, about this first one about power. That was the theme of the first one, or that is the theme of the first one. Like, how do we step into power in a different way that's not about domination, hierarchy, fear, force, domination, control, manipulation, that doesn't require that we push anybody, force them to do anything, step on them in order for us to feel powerful. And this connects to women. The women in your audience will understand this. Two things inspired the theme of power for me. One was my sister. My older sister. I'm the second oldest of 9. And it's a very Catholic family. And all within 12 years, no twins. I don't even know how my parents did that. It's crazy. But anyway, it was a different time, a different culture. We were all conceived in Cuba. So it was a different situation. My sister growing up was a natural born leader. Like, she would boss around not only the 9 of us, but the entire neighborhood, 15 kids, 18 kids. And it was just a natural thing. Like, she'd say, oh, let's go do that. And we would all say, yeah, okay, let's go do that. We just naturally followed her. When she hit puberty, something happened. Like, she just turned that off. And I don't know what happened yet. I don't know if somebody said something to her. I don't know. She picked it up through osmosis, the culture that women didn't behave in that way. And so she turned it off. And I've always, been intrigued and very saddened by that. Because, as you know, exact same qualities that in a man we say, oh my God, what a strong, decisive leader. In a woman, what a bitch, right? It's exact same behavior, exact same qualities. So that was the one inspiration. The other inspiration, probably, I don't know, it's probably been that long now. But I was sitting in meditation, and for only the second time, well, now it's happened 3, but this was the second time in my life that I had heard actual audible words of meditation. And I know that sounds, might sound weird, but that's what it was. And the words were the soul of power. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's got a good sound to it. I got up, got the URL, forgot about it. Flash forward about a month later, I had submitted a book proposal to an agent, a literary agent in New York, who said to me, wow, I like this idea. It's great, but I want to see some of these marketing plan implemented before we pitch it to a publisher. And for those in your audience who don't know, a book proposal is like a huge term paper. You got to look at the market and who is the market and why are you the person to write this book, and do a comparative analysis. What else is out there? How do they do? How is your book going to be different? How are you going to reach the audience? Blah, blah, blah. So when she said implementing the marketing idea, I was like, oh my God, that's going to take me another year just to do that. So it's like putting on the brakes. And then it kind of sent me a little bit into like a few days of crisis. Like, what am I going to do now? Because I was already kind of spending the advance in my mind. And then it hit me. It's like, wait a minute. I've been saying for years that the single most important thing that needs to happen in the world is the empowerment of women. And not to put women up on a pedestal. We know women can also abuse power and do. And it's not to give women more crap that they have to clean up and fix. It's because as a world, as a species, as a planet, we've been running very off kilter, very off balance in terms of power between the genders, and not even just between the genders, between the masculine and feminine energies. Because I know you work about you teach and write about and work with energies. And we all know we all have masculine and feminine energies, because that's what the universe is. It's both masculine and feminine. So it's also about finding that balance between each one of us, and not just between men and women. And so then, but the moment is like, oh my God, empowerment of women. Oh, but to complete the thought, when women are in 50% of power in this world, we're going to have a very different relationship to war, poverty, hunger, social justice, wealth distribution, how we treat the environment, to all of it. So when I think about strategically, what is the one thing that would then impact everything else? That's what I land on. And that's why I say that it's the single most important thing that needs to happen in the world. So it was like that solo power, women's empowerment was like one of those palms to the forehead kind of moments, like, duh, why hadn't I seen that before? So how do we step into power in a different way, right? Call it a more feminine way of that is not hierarchical, so that it's more like power with rather than power over. Because this power over kind of rape or pillage relationship to life and the world that has been running us, it's only gotten us into trouble, and we're at the point where it just doesn't work anymore. It's time for a change.
Yeah, well, those are well, I love how they all interweaved and became this perfect idea for you. So do you have like a timeline for the other two books as well, or?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me to talk about that. I got lost in the power book. So the next book is on relationships. It's about attracting and nurturing relationships that work. And it's hard to completely divide them. Like there's definitely stuff about relationships in this first one. Because I think it's the area where most of us tend to give our power away. The second one, it'll focus on romantic, intimate relationships, but the teachings really impact any kind of relationship. So how do we do those relationships in a different way? And then the third one is about personal empowerment. It's about life purpose and leadership. Like how do we step into those roles that we have really come here to play, right? How do we stop selling out for that illusion of security, and stop playing small and limiting ourselves and acting as if we're smaller than we actually are. And to that point, we've gotten confused, and we've been taught that to be all who we are, to like really step into our power fully, to shine our light as bright as we can, to really step into our purpose, that we have been conditioned to think that that's arrogance. Whereas the way that I see it, in these critical times of chaos and uncertainty, where you could say humanity's at a make it or break it point, what is arrogant is not to step into our power, is to play small. It's like, how dare we play small? How dare us hide our light under a bushel any longer? We just don't have time for that. So if anybody listening to this has the slightest suspicion that they have work to do as teachers, as healers, as activists or promoters for change, and to help this awakening happen in humanity, for our collective and personal healing, like this is it. This is the time that we've been waiting for.
Wow, that's such a perfect place to leave this off. You want to share? I'll have everything in the show notes as well. But what's the best place for people to find you and connect with you?
Thanks so much, Megan. The book is available on Amazon or at your local bookstore, right? So wherever books are sold. In terms of reaching me, probably the central way would be my website, soulfulpower.com. And from there, they can access my social media. And for people who visit my website now and they sign up to be on my email list, they'll get a sample chapter from this book. They'll get some power practices that, again, designed to apply those teachings to our lives. And they'll get a recorded meditation on trust, which my intention is to be supportive in this time of chaos and uncertainty.
That's wonderful. I think I'm sign up. And I'll keep in touch because I would love to come to one of your in-person retreats at some point.
Oh my God, Megan, it would be an honor. I'd love to stay in touch, and yeah, it would be an honor to have you there. And thank you for doing this podcast. I know that you're reaching a lot of women in particular. So thank you for that, and thank you for doing all that you do.
Well, thank you. We'll leave it off there for today. Thanks.
All right.